Let's take a look at what's inside the bag. Here's everything that I carry in my belt pouch, and I carry this kit around with me almost everywhere. There's the sketchbook, the watercolors, the brushes, and the watercolor pencils. Let's start with the book. This is a dedicated watercolor book, and the paper is heavier, designed for water media. It's sized with gelatin, and that means that it has a coating that accepts the water media. It'll work with everything from watercolor to gouache, which is opaque watercolor, or casein, which is a milk-based paint that you can also use on this. It's good if a book like this will open flat, and if it's hardback, it's well bound and well made. I like to paint a title on each new book so that I can distinguish one sketchbook from another. I also use a glue stick to glue tickets and things, so it's like a scrapbook on the end papers. The watercolor sets that I like using are pan sets, or cake watercolors. They come in a smaller size like this, which is kind of neat because it fits exactly on the opposite page from the sketchbook that I'm working on. These are made by a variety of companies, including Schmincke and Winsor Newton, Rublev, and various others. But you can customize them yourself by buying individual either smaller half pans or full pans and composing your own set. You don't need very many colors. I like having 8 to 12 colors at the most. Here's a slightly larger set with a few more colors. Basically a warm and a cool yellow, warm and a cool red, some browns, a few different blues, and a couple of greens. Since some of the watercolors are very dark in their pan form, I like to paint a series of swatches in the middle between the pans so I can see what colors they are if I'm in a dimly lit restaurant or pub. A natural history museum is a good place to do a careful study from observation. This is a wonderful old specimen of a Galapagos tortoise, the largest tortoise and one of the longest lived animals on Earth. I'm diving right in with a regular number 2 pencil on the watercolor paper, drawing the forms directly without a lot of measurement lines or anything, just eyeballing the proportions. Once I can establish the pencil lines and the basic forms in a graphite pencil, then I can lay in some tones with watercolor. Now there's not a lot of color, but I'm using raw sienna, burnt sienna, ultramarine blue, and little yellow ochre to create warm and cool grays. I leave a few dots of white paper in between, and in some of the areas that I know are going to be darker, like underneath the shell, I can use thicker paint.
My name is John O'Brien, and I'm a Civil War reenactor from Massachusetts. The unit that I reenact with is the Salem Light Infantry, and I'm wearing the uniform of the Salem Zouaves, which was a great craze in the United States and Europe for quite some time in the middle of the 19th century.
I'm at an outdoor festival and I see in the distance a tent with some reenactors from the Civil War period. I'm a little nervous to ask them to pose, but I build up my courage and go up to them, and they're very willing to pose, as most reenactors are.
The uniform consists of the red kelpie that I'm wearing with the gold braid and blue jacket and vest with red trim, gold buttons, blue chasseur pants, and gaiters.
I start by laying in the basic shapes of the face, knowing that my subject is going to be moving constantly throughout the whole process. Once I have the basic outline of the face down with water-soluble colored pencil, I can use water from the water brush to establish an overall tone for the skin tones. Then I can come in with a watercolor brush using watercolor from the pan watercolor to paint in the larger areas, the dark blue of the jacket, the red of the hat. And now I've got something that I can detail later.
We practice every week. Every week. Rain, snow, heat. However, I will say we don't always stay out the same amount of time. We do that drill to a cadence of 90 beats to the minute, and every beat is a move of the rifle.
Now in terms of technique, I'm switching now between watercolor, using a flat watercolor brush, and then dipping the watercolor brush into some cake watercolor pans in a small half pan set. These are traditional pigments using Carmen Lakes and ultramarines and some cobalt yellows and some very old-fashioned pigments which seemed appropriate for doing a Civil War reenactor.